Okay, welcome everybody today in the latest of our London Interviews podcast series for London International Shipping Week 2025. And I'm pleased to welcome Paolo Moretti, who's CEO of RINA Services. Founded in 1861 as a ship classification society, RINA began diversifying its activities in the 1990s. Its mission is to support stakeholders throughout the value chain with a strong focus on energy transition, digitalisation, and ESG sustainability. Today, RINA is a multinational company providing inspection, certification, and consulting engineering services, energy, marine certification, infrastructure, and mobility industry and real estate. With revenues in 2024 of €915 million and more than 6,200 employees in 200 offices across 70 countries around the world, RINA participates in major international organizations, contributing to the development of new regulatory standards. RINA is also a founder member of the International Association of Classification Societies, IACS, who are also a major supporting organization of London International Shipping Week. Paolo graduated in Naval and Maritime Engineering from the University of Genoa in 1996 and began his career at RINA a year later. He has held positions of increasing responsibility within the company, eventually becoming CEO of RINA Services in May 2020, a subsidiary of RINA active in the maritime and certification sector. So Paolo, welcome to our podcast today. Lovely to hear you and to meet you here online. I'm very excited about working with you for London International Shipping Week 2025, and a big thank you to your support and your continued support for what is an amazing week and a week that's going to be bigger and better than ever before. Tell me, Paolo, let's talk about you first. I mean, you've been very much heavily involved in maritime engineering and the naval side. How have you seen the maritime industry change really over the years? What sort of stuck out with you, would you say?
Yeah, you mentioned correctly. I mean, I have quite a boring CV. I mean, I started as soon as I graduated from naval architect. It was just the time of doing my 1 year of military service. Guess where? In the Navy, of course, and then joining the company. At that time, we were internationalizing the company. We were having our offices abroad. And so I was serving the first part of my career in Asia, in particular in South Korea. And then all my career within RINA was basically within our maritime sector. Now the company is pretty much diversified, as you have mentioned, but still maritime is at the core of our business. It's a word, the maritime one, that is in continuous evolution in terms, for example, of the way the company are compared to the past. Think to Italy, we had, for example, many more family-owned companies. Now is pretty much more diversified. And for the first time in history, we will face probably a transition, an energy transition, in which there will be no one single choice obliged, like it was in the past when we are passing from sailing to coal and then to fuel. But we are in the center of an energy transition that, of course, is bringing some challenges, some question marks about the future fuels, the best options. And so definitely this is something that is going to change the way we are working in this business compared to the past. So it's like a sort of revolution. And we do expect that for the first time in history, probably one of the outcome of this will be that there might be, for the first time in shipping, different fuels according to the different type of ships, the routes, and the operational profile.
I mean, the industry talks about this, and they say the one certainty we have in fuel transition is the whole uncertainty of it all, and whether it's going to be methanol or whether it's going to be LNG or whether it's going to be ammonia or nuclear or whatever. That uncertainty within the industry, how are we grappling with it? I mean, what are a lot of challenges, but how can we solve that issue? Because the ship owners are basically saying, we just don't know what to do yet.
Yeah, this is exactly the point. And I think also us as classification society, but in case of RINA, also company heavily involved in the consulting engineering and also in other industries, we need to give our, let's say, support to somehow solve this uncertainty. And so sometimes we have to put in the shoes of our customers, of our owners, and think, what would I do? I mean, if I had to invest right now. So I think that it's quite clear that for the short term, so means today, 3% of the ships are still that are sailing in the water are still with fossil fuels. So this is something that we cannot forget. So the first measure is definitely the best fuel is the one that we don't burn. So is saving. Is saving, is doing retrofits, and maybe start introducing sort of drop-in solutions like the biofuel. If we had to order now and so think to a vessel that will be in the water for the next 15 to 20 years, I think that for sure the flexibility is the real important thing. So I would say that ordering a ship with a dual fuel, probably LNG is at the moment the most viable, let's say, option, or in any case, a ship that is ready even to a retrofitting at a later period. LNG ready, methanol ready are basically the two options. So possibility of having a dual fuel, so we will be flexible because if really the biofuel will drop in and like HVO and the second generation biofuel in the future, the vessel is nothing to change. In the same time, even if LNG will, let's say, evolve to bio LNG and in the future even synthetic LNG, everything is already designed in place. And that's why I think that if myself, sometimes I ask myself, if I had to order a ship now, probably the flexibility is the thing I would look and I would rate as the most important. And so I would be quite vocal in saying that dual fuel LNG would be probably, in terms of cargo ship, one of the first option. Maybe with some carbon capture devices to also help when I'm using only the fuel. In the long term, and so here we are coming to what will happen within 2050 when we will need to reach the so-called zero emission, of course. Here we have to invest. Here I agree that still we have to invest and to remain a little bit more unbiased from the current situation and look with a future perspective. But again, I think that still biofuel, maybe the second generation, the one coming from recycling of synthetic raw material and even synthetic fuels, because of course we will have the possibility of a lot of carbon capture that mixed CO2 that mixed with green hydrogen produced at lower prices in some areas where you have a lot of solar energy. Or why not even the so-called pink hydrogen produced by nuclear small modular reactor will definitely help to lower the prices for synthetic fuels. So I think that if we have to give now answers, as I said, short term, save, mid-term, flexibility, and in the long term, of course, try to invest and try to work in strong cooperation as we do, for example, also with other industry to understand where, I mean, the International Energy Agency data that is given, we have a lot of shore to abate industry that will need for sure a lot of carbon capture in the future. There will be a lot of CO2 becoming more and more as a commodity that should be transported, handled, and stored, and then definitely also the possibility of having synthetic fuel in the future. As I said before, with hydrogen either coming from green energy or directly from nuclear, that could be. Nuclear is something that we don't have to forget. I think that the first application in shipping could be in producing clean hydrogen or, let's say, giving clean energy imports to ships that are doing, let's say, the so-called cold ironing, like large cruise ships or large container ship. So I believe that small modular reactors, why not, even on floating installation, with the primarily scope to give clean energy to ports and to hubs in which, let's say, clean hydrogen for synthetic fuels is produced would be in the long term certainly a solution that we will have to keep under the radar, because I think at the end, in terms of space occupancy and let's say all the type of, let's say, complete carbon footprint LCA, the nuclear will definitely have to play a role.
The challenge, I guess, that the industry has got is the fragmentation of the industry, where you've got leaders in fuel transition, who are investing, and as you rightly say, dual fuel and what have you, and then looking ahead as well. And we'll come on to the whole issue of infrastructure because that's quite important at the moment. But then you've also got the whole barrage of laggard ship owners who, really haven't even embraced digitalisation yet, let alone anything else. How can we square that circle, Paolo? Because that's quite a difficult One, because you're dealing with a global shipping industry, you're dealing with a massive amount of opportunity, but you've also dealing with an industry that's got to hit its 2050 targets as well.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that for the long term, there will probably be different
Yeah.
solutions according to the type of vessels, the routes. So, of course, green corridors is something that, if can be applied to some companies, is an ideal solution because basically you are trading between two nations in which you do investments. Maybe you have a multi-fuel hub, but this is only for a part of the shipping. We don't have to forget that the main reason why shipping is to be considered hard to abate industries because it is global. So you need to do bunkering everywhere. And so that's why I'm saying that in the long run, this flexibility would be necessary, and probably the use of biofuel, synthetic fuel that will not require substantial modification neither on the ship or in the infrastructure that has to store this fuel and to put it on board of a bunkering vessels, it's a drop-in. Because if you are a dual fuel, for example, with heavy fuel oil and LNG in the future, if there is, let's say, a biofuel and a bio LNG, you don't have you have to change a really, really minor modification on the vessel. And in the same time, also the bunkering and the infrastructure facilities are okay to be shifted from standard fossil to bio. So that's why I'm saying that probably in the long run, it will be the first time in history that we will not have the same fuel for all the shipping industry. But for sure, we will have to take into consideration that there are companies that can be on fixed route between Australia to Far East, I mean, from Rotterdam to Singapore, and then, of course, benefiting of big harbors, multi-fuel hubs, or areas in which it's quite, let's say, easy to have production of green hydrogen, green ammonia from solar energy, while the rest, of course, of the shipping will still need to trade globally, I mean, to have the possibility of finding proper bunkering everywhere.
Now, Rena, you've done a number of studies with other entities looking at this. You've done the clear ship decarbonisation and fuel infrastructure development, looking at that worldwide. You've done a study with ENI and also Fincantieri on decarbonisation of shipping. Can you give us a little insight into what was behind that and what were the main sort of findings of those where concerned?
Yeah, as you mentioned, the study with ENI and Fincantieri basically confirmed this outlook for the short term, middle term, let's say up to 2030, and 2050 long run outlook that I confirmed before. So with biofuels picking up more and more, and then between 2040 and 50, also a stronger influence of the so-called synthetic fuel or the second generation biofuels. And as I said before, in the short term, the possibility of flexible vessels to be ordered with dual fuel with LNG. The study on CLIA that is, of course, on the cruise ships, in any case, pointed out one thing that it's quite evident that there is still a lack of infrastructure around. I mean, we talk about methanol, but at the moment there are probably only less than 20 methanol bunkering facilities worldwide. Maybe there are another under construction, but it will be difficult to have ports that can become multi-fuel hubs. This probably will be something remaining for Singapore, for some hubs in the US, for some Northern European ports. Maybe something role could be played in Mediterranean countries, probably like Spain. I don't know if even Italy would have the possibility to arrive to this type of because you really, if you want to have the possibility of accommodating and servicing two or three different fuels, it really demands a lot in terms of course of logistic and spaces. So I think that, and for example, we are discussing it before about ironing. We know very well that large cruise ships and containers will need to have cold ironing by law in Europe starting from 2030, but still we see that we are lagging behind with, let's say, cold ironing facility. And then cold ironing doesn't mean anything if then the energy is not coming from a clean solution, because if it's coming from let's say a power plant that is fueled with fossil fuel at the end. It's just a matter of shifting the problem from the single harbor to the more global area. So I think that from what we are seeing, we need to see, and I think the new Fuel EU Maritime, from a certain point of view, even if it is debated and sometimes considered as a regional regulations, it's at least quite clear in saying that you have to work in parallel with on the ship and on the infrastructure. And there, of course, will be played one of the most significant and important role for this energy transition, because, of course, the logistic of the fuels availability will play a major role for the future. What we are saying is that, of course, there are areas in the world that are more active. Before I
Yeah.
mentioned Northern European, in which we start having the first cold ironing fully with renewable energies. We are involved in the design of terminals for storage handling of CO2, alternative fuels terminal, areas in which so far, in particular, let's say, outside Europe and US, in which we are still lagging behind. And as we said, the shipping is something global. So this is something that at the end will play, as I said, a major role, because from here to 2050, as I mentioned before, there will be only some, let's say, multi-fuel hubs capable of giving the full spectrum of fuels available. For the rest, we will need to address everything with the idea that probably the biofuel and synthetic fuels will play the most important role, because probably they could be stored and they could be adapted to the existing infrastructure more easily.
So is it going to increase the reliance on the development of green corridors? Because that way you can invest. You can see a reason to invest in that side of it. That, you've got a whole group of ships that are going to be coming from one point to another. So are you going to see more
Yes, I
more
think
reliance?
I think so, that there will be more reliance for those, of course, that can, let's say, rely on this type of traffic. And I think there will be more and more, let's say, vessels deployed in these green corridors, and a higher number of green corridors developed. But of
Yeah.
course, as I mentioned, probably this one will be the front runner for the new alternative fuels, and of course, they will develop the so-called multi-fuel hubs that I was mentioning before. For the rest, we will almost certainly have to rely more on the bio and synthetic fuel. It will be difficult to have maybe green methanol or other fuels stored and distributed all over the world.
So before I come on to the sort of general innovation and technology and digitalisation, just finishing on the fuel side. I mean, with the role of the class societies, yourself and IACS, I remember sitting down with the Secretary General of the IMO a couple of years ago, and he said there's a greater reliance on the NGOs to do the work of the IMO because of a lack of resource within the IMO as much as anything else. Is more of the responsibility being put on the shoulders of the class society to come up with solutions on things like fuels and such like? Are you finding that your workload and the reliance on you is becoming?
Well, of course, in terms of on the legislative part, as you know, is still the institution. So IMO, the flag states, or at regional level, EU. Of course, now for the first time, we sometimes we face a new technology that somehow you have to certify, and the international regulation framework not yet ready. So from our point of view, we receive a strong benefit from the fact that we have this cross-fertilization, I would call it, from other industries. So there are other industries in which we work, in which we have already seen some technology. I mean, we are already using hydrogen on trains with fuel cells. We are already dealing with carbon capture systems on projects of pumping it underneath the seabed. We are already dealing with material problems related to hydrogen on pipings. So this gives us the possibility to, through, of course, the competence and risk assessment, to, at the end, come out with a technology qualification, and so at the end to have the possibility to certify according to a standard, even if the international rule frameworks is not yet there. So
Yeah.
I think this is, let's say, one of the challenge for class society. So being mastering the technologies, and the choice that as RINA we made starting from 2011 to diversify and to have a separated consulting engineering operative company is really helping us in these days to have people that are doing things, not only studying or preparing regulations.
Yeah. I mean, looking at the industry itself and digitalization, I mean, I get very excited about shipping all the time. It's a tremendous industry and it's very fast moving, it's very agile. And we've seen that over a number of issues over the last few years with COVID and with the geopolitics. We'll come on to a little bit on geopolitics in a second, how shipping is able to adapt very quickly. AI and innovation and digitalization is something that's hit the shipping industry in a big way over the last 3 to 5 years. Shipping has been accused of being a little bit behind the curve, and when compared to other industries like the aviation industry and what have you. But it seems to be accelerating ahead. So a lot of opportunities, a lot of challenges ahead for shipping to embrace it, but a lot of opportunities. Looking at things like technology, digital tools, all that sort of side of it. What are your predictions for the short, medium, and long term? I mean, do you see AI and digitalization playing an even more of a role in all of this? Is it very much supportive of what the industry and class is doing and all these other sectors are doing? How do you see it all panning out?
Yeah, I think there is no coming back. I think that shipping somehow has also suffered from problems and the costs of not having, let's say, cost-effective way of communicate, of covering ships when they are serving and sailing worldwide. So there was a cost for the connection, the transmission of data that progressively are of course decreasing. I think that ships are built more and more with all the sensors needed for, let's say, improving a sort of telemetric approach, or at least to provide a lot of data to be further analyzed within the company, and that could be, of course, accessed also by class society. We started from our own to install data collectors on board for energy performance purposes. So working from the trim optimization to all the monitoring of the thermodynamic and hydrodynamic features of vessels. But I think that the future is designed to go more and more in a sort of risk-based maintenance inspections with data directly transmitted ashore and to OEMs, to manufacturers. I mean, the technology will need for sure some additional complexity on board. There will be a great need for training, for upskilling, but also the possibility of having, let's say, class makers, owners, owner structures, managers that will remain easily connected and will get important data, will play definitely a great role. And AI in this case, when you receive so many data, so the importance of AI will be really connecting the dots and giving, let's say, a sort of sense and working more and more on the predictive maintenance. This is what we see for the future. Of course, we are already working on it because we are the typical example doing inspection, audit, and surveys all over the world to over 8,000 ships, to companies. We have such a huge amount of data, and applying AI on that and giving us the possibility to determine some patterns, defining some KPIs to be improved, and give the possibility of also make a sort of, I would say, rating on the certain type of vessels, how they perform, how many deficiency they get, how they are, the post-state control issues. So it's really important. But on the operator side, I see more and more ships, of course, coming out with the possibility of being, let's say, of being sensorized and have everything in place, not only for an efficient fuel-saving management that, let's not forget, is very important also for the decarbonization path, but more and more to shift from a traditional maintenance to a risk-based maintenance to prevent accidents. And in the future, also to have the possibility of, with the new regulatory framework, after years in which we have taken under also vessels remotely operated or even autonomous ships.
Are you excited about the future? What do you think of the opportunities here?
I think that there will be always new opportunities. AI will not, replace humans, probably replace humans without AI. So there will be a great need for reskilling people. I think that for crew members, they will have more and more possibility of working on shore. As I said, in this data center, maybe in control rooms, dedicated control rooms in which, with their experience, they can address. They could do more and more remote service, remote inspection of the vessels. And sometimes when we think also to the decarbonization path, to the fact that, for example, we will have less fossil fuel, but of course we will need more CO2 to be transported. Now we have a lot of car carriers for electric vehicles. We will have tankers for new fuels. So I think that maybe there will be some transformation in the traded goods and maybe in the routes, and there could be also, I believe, a surge in short sea shipping.
Yeah.
But definitely, I think that there will be more and more opportunities. If I have to make coming to the geopolitical also issue that we are facing in these days and some restrictions in the traffic, and I think that like it happened in all the industries, there will be need in this transition of great and significant investments. So probably the market will become more concentrated. So large players will grow larger, smaller ones may struggle a little bit. This is something that not in the medium time, but in the long run, I will see. Probably, as we said before, the large players that will benefit from, for example, the green corridors,
Yeah.
compare to the standard type of smaller ownerships.
I mean, looking at the geopolitical scenario, the situation is so fast changing. I mean, we even heard today that there might be changes in the tariffs, that are coming out of the US. It just sort of something seems to change every day. How can the industry cope with this? I mean, you've got supply chains, you've got raw materials, you've got new routes, you've got ship owners with new demands, and operators and charterers with new demands. What pressures does that put on an organisation like RINA, would you say? And how do you cope with it? What are your strategies?
Well, if I come back to what I was mentioning before, so to the possibility, for example, shipping routes changing
Yeah,
depending on the availability of infrastructure and green fuels, prioritizing, for example, green corridors,
yeah,
or, for example, infrastructure that will be clean infrastructure that will be concentrated in areas rather than other one. I think that, of course, being international and having a strong networks is something that your presence, your international footprint will be, of course, one of the first thing in which you will have to act. The second one, of course, is to move a little bit faster than the others on new technologies. As I said before, new carriers and new traded goods that could come around, like as I said before, tankers for new fuel rather than ships to transport capture CO2. I think that if you start developing and working to have approval in principle of new type of ships, this is of course creating the competencies to address these new fuels and this new technology. This is one of the first challenge for a class society. And as I said before, the fact that we have this strong cross-fertilization coming from other industry, from this point of view, give us, according to me, a very good advantage.
Paolo, and it's been a delight talking to you today. There are a lot of challenges, but a massive amount of
No.
opportunities moving ahead. And I think when you've got organisations like RINA that are playing a crucial role that you're playing within the global shipping industry, we're in very, very safe hands as we look to the opportunities ahead. But I'd like to thank you for your time today. It's been an absolute joy, huge amount of knowledge that you have, and thank you for putting it all into context. And just to say to listeners, go onto the LISW.com website where you can access the London interviews, and they're on the drop down menu and you can download them. But Paolo, thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you very much for your support for London International Shipping Week. It's really important that organisations like yourselves are involved in this, because you have so much to give on at a technical level into the industry, and we need to tap into your knowledge and your foresight as well. But thank you very much indeed for your time today. It's been a delight.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure, and hope to see all people around for the edition of the London International Shipping Week.
Brilliant. Thank you.